This is the podcast overview for week 10, where we will be covering Chapter 9, Job Stress. So here is your to-do list for the week. You'll notice you have a test this week covering chapters 8 to 9. Let's kind of go through this. We have the chapter objectives, so you can click here and listen to the podcast that outlines each of these objectives. You have the lecture slides for Harrington, Chapter 9. And then your discussion for this week deals with the Harrington text, so we do not have any reading in the McGonagall book this week. So for the job stress chapter, the first question you're going to be looking at is which of the 5 models of organizational stress best applies to your current job or your role as a student if you are a full-time student and you're not working. In what ways does it apply? And what control might you have over these or power to change these? So it's really getting you to think about how you fit your stress in your current role today. What kind of model best depicts your level of organizational stress? And this is changing as your role changes. So when you are not a student anymore and you go out and you have a full-time job, this is going to change. So it's getting you to kind of think in that way. The second one, when you procrastinate on school or work assignments, which I know none of you do, what are your primary reasons? How does it make you feel? And then using what you've learned from the chapter, what strategies for burnout and procrastination would help you the most. So I really want you to think about applying this to you and choose what would work well for you and explain. Don't just choose, what the book says is good, but based on what the book tells you, what do you see working the best in your life around your personality and your temperament and your kind of method and mode for doing things. And then lastly, I'll have to change this to number 3 here. Given the current climate of COVID and the pandemic that we're in, what unique factors are people faced with in their workplace stresses, right? So we might have everyday normal workplace stress, but how might that be different now, given COVID, and maybe you work in a area that's been affected more heavily by the pandemic. So explain that, talk about that. You can obviously kind of extrapolate and theorize here as to what you think might be happening. If you know of somebody maybe who's affected by COVID at their workplace, you might choose to chat with them. Ask them a little bit about that and write about that, whichever you prefer. I just kind of want to get you guys thinking about how even temporary constraints and situations can place a great deal of stress, additional stress, on people in the workplace. And that wraps up the discussion. Your test will be right underneath the discussion, and that should appear Monday for you. That's adaptive release, so that'll appear Monday right underneath there. And again, that test is covering chapters 8 and 9. And again, the best way to study for those tests is to be using these objectives that I give, making sure that you're able to really develop each of these, discuss each of these, kind of know the ins and outs of each one. You can also use your chapter summary and concept review, which is at the end of your Harrington chapter. You can use that to create an additional outline of topics that you can study off of. And you can obviously go through and fill that in with more detail. The chapter summaries really is just that. It gives you a very brief summary, but it makes sure that you're getting all the key points, and then you can go back in and kind of fill it in with specifics and examples that might help you to better study for the test. And that wraps up week 10.